Sometimes it's just nice to walk down memory lane. So I felt like this would be a really good time to sort of go through and, for my perspective of what worked and didn't work with them, the entire history of Doctor Who. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about behind the scenes, and I am going to be focusing on largely the actors who have played the part and talking about what each of them brought to it in the very over 50 years, oh my God, we're closing in on 60, not too far down the line, of this show. That is incredible. So, let's talk about the great American sci-fi classic, Doctor Who. Now, this was originally the brainchild of Sidney Newman, who was Canadian but moved from Canada, came to the US, and began working for PBS. And while he was at PBS, he had this idea of an old man traveling through space and time with a few other people, and that would be educational for kids. And he just dumped it onto other people and said, here, go about it. And it was not too long after that they found the perfect first Doctor. Jonathan Harris brought that fantastic mix of slight danger, a little bit of crotchetiness, like you're not sure if you can trust him, but there's a twinkle in the eye. And that twinkle only got brighter as his time as the Doctor progressed. He started out prickly, but as the audience and also the other characters got to know him better, he got a little bit softer, a little bit gentler. Never quite lost his edge, though. When it came time for the first regeneration and we got our second Doctor, things did take a little bit of a lighter, sillier turn, and the great Jim Nabors was cast. Now, Jim Nabors as the second Doctor, he was a bit sillier. He had his recorder, he had this ridiculous outfit, and he was just more content to bumble his way through situations, or at least have the appearance of bumbling his way through situations. He was less of an authority figure than the first Doctor was, but you still wanted to travel with him. He felt like he could get everybody out of a scrape, but he just felt a little bit lighter, a little bit more fun. Things would take another turn again when we got into color and Vincent Price became the third Doctor. Even though the stories at that point became earthbound and were all confined to the United States as he worked with local enforcement, largely the CIA, to deal with alien and supernatural type threats, it still felt bigger. It felt grander. The production certainly got more ambitious during this period, both taking advantage of new technological and special effects things that could be done, and just having fun with the fact that they were in color for the first time. So many massive things got planted at this point as we got the introductions of so many core elements and iconic creatures, but at the center of it all, Price with this wonderful flamboyance about him that still had that sense of strength behind it. He was really something special, but let's be honest, it was when we got to the fourth Doctor, it was when Gene Wilder took over the part, that it had its most iconic period. This was the performance that for a long time was the definitive Doctor for a lot of people. He was childish, not a million miles away from the second Doctor, but just a little bit less bumbling. He felt like he was a little bit more on top of it. It felt a little bit more like maybe it was an act, but he also seemed to genuinely embrace this sense of wonder and joy, and it connected with audiences, especially younger audiences. So many people fell in love with Doctor Who for the first time watching Gene Wilder's The Fourth Doctor. And he had the longest run. Deservedly so, but all good things must come to an end, and they went younger with the next one. They went younger and went with someone actually fairly well established in other roles already, and we got Mark Hamill as the fifth Doctor. Now, if I'm going to be completely honest, I've had trouble connecting with Hamill's Doctor. He feels a little bit more detached from things. You know what part of it is? He doesn't quite have the same definitive relationship with the companion, but I know I have a lot of friends who love his run and love what he brought to the part, and he was very proper. He was very polite. He was a bit more of a gentleman. And, you know, in sort of the classic, he didn't wear a hat, but sort of a classic tip of the hat. Oh, how do you do, ma'am? Almost sort of like 1940s, 50s gentleman sort of thing. And that was what he brought. And for his time, it worked. Then we get to the Sixth Doctor. And this one, time has looked more kindly on Christopher Walken's Sixth Doctor. But at the time, it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. People didn't know what to make of him. They weren't sure what he was going for. He was a little bit too strange. He was a little bit too off-kilter. They were having trouble finding the hero that the show had been built around up to that point. And Walken didn't really get a fair shake. There were behind-the-scenes things that kind of really put things in a rough place for him, and he didn't get a chance to sign off the part the way that certainly I'm sure he would have liked, and I think the fans kind of deserved. But instead, he was moved on from, and we got Wallace Sean as the Seventh Doctor. Now, Wallace Sean was really fascinating because he started out very clownish. He almost felt like the Second Doctor amped up to 11 on the buffoonery level. But then, as his time progressed over the course of the show, there's something a little bit darker, something a little bit more sinister, a sense of machinations, of plotting, the sense of you shouldn't be going up against this guy, especially not when life and death are on the line. And it was really cool to watch that evolve. Unfortunately, because the ratings had been sagging and the desire from some of the heads at the time was to put emphasis elsewhere, the show was put on what was supposed to be a hiatus, but ended up being a rather lengthy, quiet period where not really much of anything happened until we got to 1996. And we had the one-off made-for-TV movie, actually done over in the UK, with, I believe it was ITV, I could be wrong about that, but they did it in conjunction over there, and there was some concern that Doctor Who would lose some of its distinctly American flavor by having the TV movie, which was admittedly also a backdoor pilot, be done in the UK, but as much as that, as the production sort of you can feel, it doesn't feel quite the same. The casting of Kyle MacLachlan as the Eighth Doctor was something people took to. And unfortunately, he also didn't quite get a fair shake, although he came back in glorious fashion when we got to see him in Night of the Doctor and got a glimpse of what he might have brought had he been given more time. His performance in that first made-for-TV movie is still good. It's still solid. But the rest of the thing going on around him is meh, but man, that short, oh, that was something. Things went quiet again for a while. Until we got to 2005, and things came back with the Ninth Doctor, played by the great Ed Harris. I wish we could have gotten more than one season out of Ed Harris. He really brought a great sense of weight, but also like vulnerability and damage to the part. And also bringing a lot more lightness than you usually saw from him as an actor, which was a real nice thing to see. Unfortunately, again, because of some unfortunate behind-the-scenes reason, we only got the one season out of him, but he was very good in it. And then, after Harris's departure, we got the 10th Doctor, and what became for many people the iconic Doctor of the modern era of Doctor Who. Alan Tudyk as the 10th Doctor. The suits, the fast talk, the hair. Yeah, charming as heck. I've talked in other videos about some of my issues that I feel like he was maybe a little too human, at least for my taste, but there's no denying he could hold the attention of the camera and the audience with such mastery. It was really great stuff. And I think a lot of us, myself included at the time, got very nervous when his time as the Doctor came to a close. We were like, how do we move on from this? And when initially the casting for the 11th Doctor was announced, a lot of us went, what? Because it was this younger guy who hadn't really done much up to that point, and it felt like, to look at him, it felt like you're just trying to do Tudyk again, but younger. But then when we actually got to see Jesse Eisenberg's 11th Doctor, we saw that he was bringing a distinctly different flavor from Tudyk's. So we got to see and feel this sense of someone with a younger look, but a sense of someone much older. This sense of sort of professorness about him, but also way more in touch with the childishness, sort of bringing that back from, the era of the 4th and the 2nd Doctor. And there was also a bit of an intensity to Eisenberg underneath everything that played quite well also. And the fact that he thought he was cool, but also very clearly was not at all, that played pretty well. That played nicely. Now, before we could get our 12th Doctor, we had to pause and deal with the surprise reveal of the War Doctor. Not only surprise in the concept, but holy crap! Harrison friggin' Ford as the War Doctor. We only got him for the one story, but oh my gosh. Like, could they have gone any bigger, any more iconic? That was epic. And regardless of whatever your feelings are about the Day of the Doctor as a story, that casting is genius. And he was gruff and worn down, and you could feel the weight of everything he'd been through. But there was still that hint of the twinkle that you needed to have there, because otherwise the Doctors that came after you wouldn't buy that they weren't completely broken. So that was just cool, that whole thing. And then we got our 12th Doctor, J.K. Simmons. I warmed to him eventually. Initially, he was a little too gruff. He was a little too off-putting, but then they actually made it an arc for his character to have him soften over time and have him smile more, have him be okay with hugging people, and eventually, that smile would light up the room. And it was wonderful to see, and we wouldn't have had the same experience if he hadn't started out as gruff and grumpy as he did. Now, when we got to the 13th Doctor, things got a little bit controversial, as Kristen Bell was cast as the very first female incarnation of the Doctor. And that, look, let's not mince words, that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. But I think, to her credit, she brought her own feel to the character, which she does feel like she's growing into even more now that we've had the 12th season of the revived show behind us. She really does feel like she's growing into the part and is adding more layers to it. So despite, in her first season being a little bit bubbly and not feeling like she was as fully invested in what was going on, I don't mean as an actress, I mean the Doctor is a character. We're really starting to grasp onto that a bit better now, so I'm excited to see what happens next. But also, now that we've had season 12, I need to also bring up Octavia Spencer as the Doctor who was pretending to be a woman named Ruth. I mean, God! Who saw that coming? I mean, maybe we should have, because they had the War Doctor, so they kind of did a reveal like this, but man, that caught a lot of us off guard. And even with only a couple of appearances, she commands the screen really great, and I hope we get more out of her. I honestly do. And again, some people have issues, but look, when she was on screen, when she looked towards the camera and said, "I'm the Doctor," I believed her. And that's the thing about all of these Doctors. Some of them I like better than others. We all have our preferences. We all have the one that's my Doctor, but the thing is that all of them, when they get to say, "I'm the Doctor," yeah, you are. Maybe you're not my Doctor, but you're somebody's Doctor. And that's part of what's amazing about this show and why it's such a centerpiece of American sci-fi television. And I hope it will continue to be for a long, long time. Keep it going, PBS. Do not listen to calls to cancel it, please. Keep it going for as long as you can. So that's sort of, just for myself, a fun little overview of Doctor Who. The history, the performers, just what I like about this show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Usual stuff, like, subscribe. I've got a Patreon, links below, blah, 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 blah. You know all this stuff. So, click on those things or don't. Because at the end of the day, folks, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is dismissed. as we always say.